World War II is often remembered through famous battles, leaders, and turning points. But most of the war did not happen in dramatic moments. It happened quietly, between movements, between orders, between moments that were never meant to be recorded. This documentary focuses on those rare moments, not the ones history highlights, but the ones it quietly passes by. Moments that reveal how the war was actually lived. During World War II, cameras were present in many places, yet very little was truly noticed. Many images were taken without intention. Some were never published. Others were quietly forgotten. They captured people waiting, standing still, looking away from the lens. These moments did not fit headlines or official narratives, but they showed daily reality. Most of the war was not action. It was waiting, waiting for instructions, waiting for daylight, waiting for silence. Soldiers spent long hours sitting in ruined buildings, trenches, and basements. Time moved slowly, measured by small changes in light and sound. These moments rarely appear in history books. The people seen in these images were not heroes in the traditional sense. They were ordinary men and women placed into extraordinary circumstances. They adjusted uniforms, shared food, checked their surroundings again and again. Nothing about these moments felt heroic to them. They felt normal. Cities during the war were not just locations. They became environments that shaped every movement. Broken streets forced people into narrow paths. Collapsed buildings created shadows that felt permanent. People learned where to stand, where not to move, where sound traveled too far. The camera sometimes captured these details without intention. Some of the most powerful wartime images contain no visible action, no movement, no clear event, just silence. A person standing alone, a group resting against a wall, a street completely empty. These moments often spoke more clearly than images of action. Many wartime photographs exist without explanation, no caption, no date, no names. They show expressions without answers, scenes without conclusions. The people in them did not know they would be remembered or forgotten. These images matter because they show what history often hides: the spaces between events, the human presence inside uncertainty. They remind us that history is not only shaped by decisions, but by endurance. As time passed, these quiet moments became longer and heavier. The war settled into routines that were never meant to exist. Morning did not bring relief. Night did not bring rest. Light only changed the way ruins looked. Winter arrived without warning. Cold air moved freely through broken walls and empty windows. People learned to live inside layers of clothing. Hands moved slowly. Breath became visible. The cold was not dramatic. It was constant. Weapons felt heavier. Metal burned the skin. Simple tasks took twice as long. In these moments, no one spoke about victory or defeat. Those words felt distant. What mattered was warmth, a sheltered corner, a place to sit without being seen. Between movements, soldiers waited, sometimes for hours, sometimes for nothing at all. Waiting became a skill, listening to distant sounds, watching shadows change, learning which noises meant nothing and which did not. Time stretched. A single hour could feel endless. A full day could disappear without notice. In ruined buildings, people shared space quietly. No one asked questions. Everyone understood the rules without speaking. Food was simple and limited. It was divided carefully. Nothing was wasted. A small portion could hold more meaning than words. Conversations were brief, often unfinished. Memories of home appeared unexpectedly. a street, a room, a familiar sound. They arrived suddenly in Duralam just as quickly. Cities under pressure developed their own rhythm. Not the rhythm of normal life, but something slower and more cautious. People moved along familiar paths, avoided open spaces, learned which areas felt safer, even if none truly were. The camera sometimes captured these patterns, not intentionally, not with purpose, just fragments of routine. A figure leaning against a wall, someone adjusting a coat, a group standing still, waiting for something to change. Nothing dramatic happened in these moments, and yet they defined daily life. Fear was present, but it was quiet. It did not shout. It stayed close. It reminded people to move carefully, to pause, soften, to remain aware. These were not moments meant to be remembered. They were moments meant to be endured, and most of the time, they passed without notice. As days blended together, these quiet moments began to feel endless. The war no longer felt like a series of events. It felt like an environment. People adapted without realizing it. Movements became slower. Voices became softer. Even silence changed. In some places, silence felt safe. In others, it felt unnatural. People learned the difference. Cameras continued to record fragments of this life, not history as it would later be told, but history as it was lived. A person standing near a doorway, someone watching the street without moving, a group sitting close together sharing warmth. These images had no clear beginning or ending. They were moments suspended in time. The people in them did not know they were being observed. They were not performing. They were simply existing. Many of these images survived without explanation. No notes, no context, just faces, postures, expressions. They invite questions that were never answered. What were they thinking? What were they waiting for? How long had they already been there? History rarely pauses to ask. As conditions slowly changed, some of these moments disappeared. Streets emptied. Buildings collapsed further. People moved on. Or did not. The camera was sometimes the only witness. After the war, attention shifted elsewhere. Rebuilding began. New stories took priority. The quiet moments were left behind. Boxes of photographs remained unopened. Negatives faded. Details were lost. But the presence of those moments remains. They remind us that history is not only shaped by major decisions, but by patience, adaptation, and endurance. By people who waited, who watched, who learned how to exist inside uncertainty. These rare moments matter because they show the war without distance, without explanation, without resolution. They show history as it felt, not as it was summarized. And perhaps that is why they were never meant to be shown. Over time, waiting became more than just a pause between actions. It became a way of life. People learned to sit without moving, to stand without speaking, to remain alert while appearing calm. This state did not come naturally. It developed slowly through repetition. Every day reinforced the same lesson. Movement attracted attention, and attention brought risk. So people adapted. They chose corners carefully. They positioned themselves near walls. They avoided open spaces whenever possible. Even posture changed. Shoulders lowered, heads tilted slightly downward. Eyes moved more than bodies. The city itself encouraged this behavior. Ruined buildings created narrow passages. Collapsed stairwells forced slow movement. Debris shaped paths that felt safer, even when they were not. People stopped walking straight lines. They followed curves and shadows. The camera sometimes captured these changes without meaning to. A person pressed against a wall, someone pausing before crossing an open space. These were not dramatic moments. They were learned responses. Time also began to feel different. Hours stretched longer than expected. Minutes passed slowly, then suddenly disappeared. There was no clear rhythm to the day. Light entered ruins at unfamiliar angles. Darkness arrived earlier than expected. Without normal routines, people relied on small signals, changes in sound, shifts in temperature, the presence or absence of others nearby. These signals replaced clocks. In many places, silence carried information. A quiet street could mean safety, or it could mean something else entirely. People learned to listen beyond sound, to sense absence, to notice when something familiar was missing. The camera often recorded silence without showing it directly, an empty frame, a still figure, a moment where nothing appeared to happen. And yet, everything was happening internally. Thoughts slowed, decisions became cautious, actions were delayed until certainty felt stronger than fear. In these moments, no one thought about the future in clear terms. Plans felt unnecessary. What mattered was the next hour, the next safe place, the next moment of stillness. Objects took on new importance: a piece of cloth, a small container, a solid doorway. Things that once felt ordinary now carried meaning. The camera sometimes lingered on these details, not intentionally, just long enough to capture their presence. A hand resting on a railing, boots placed carefully beside a wall, a coat folded and unfolded again. These details rarely appear in official records, but they defined daily existence. People became observers of their own environment, always watching, always adjusting. This constant awareness was exhausting, but it became normal. Fatigue did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated quietly. Movement slowed further. Voices lowered more. Pauses grew longer. And still, people remained, not because of strength, but because adaptation made staying possible. The camera did not record endurance directly. It recorded its traces. A posture held too long. A gaze that lingered. A moment of rest that felt earned. These moments were not meant to be remembered. They were meant to pass. But somehow, they remained. As time continued, people stopped counting days altogether. Numbers lost their meaning. What mattered was not how long something lasted, but whether it ended quietly. Morning was no longer a beginning. It was simply a change in light. The day did not start. It unfolded. People opened their eyes without expectation. There was no plan to follow, only conditions to read: the air, the sounds outside, the absence of movement. Each morning began with listening, footsteps in the distance, a door opening somewhere below, a sound that did not belong. Only after listening did people move. Movement was never rushed. Haste attracted attention, so everything was done slowly, standing up, adjusting clothing, looking toward the same familiar points in the room. Every object had a place, and every place had meaning. A wall that provided cover, a window that offered light without exposure, a corner where sound carried less. People learned these details not by instruction, but by experience. Mistakes were remembered, not spoken about, not discussed, just remembered. Inside ruined buildings, time behaved strangely. Hours passed unnoticed. Light moved across broken walls in unpredictable ways. Dust particles drifted slowly, visible only when the sun reached them. Sometimes that light felt peaceful. Sometimes it felt wrong. People learned to trust instinct more than thought. If something felt out of place, They waited. Waiting did not always bring clarity, but it prevented error. In shared spaces, silence became a form of agreement. No one needed to explain it. Words were unnecessary. A glance was enough. A pause communicated more than speech. People learned to recognize each other by movement rather than faces, by rhythm, by habits. Someone who walked too confidently stood out. Someone who paused too long raised concern. Normal behavior had changed, and everyone understood this without being told. Food arrived irregularly. When it did, it was accepted without comment. There was no discussion of fairness, no complaints, only careful division. Eating was not rushed. Each movement was deliberate, not out of respect for the food, but for the moment. These moments of stillness were fragile. They could end without warning. So people stayed present. Memory worked differently as well. Thoughts of the past appeared in fragments, not full scenes. A sound from another time, a smell that briefly returned, then gone. The future felt distant, not frightening, just undefined. Planning ahead felt unnecessary. What mattered was maintaining balance, remaining unnoticed, remaining prepared. The city itself seemed to observe. Buildings stood partially intact, as if pausing mid-collapse. Staircases ended suddenly. Rooms opened into open air. Every structure carried signs of interruption. People moved through these spaces with caution, as if the city might respond. And sometimes it did. A wall shifted slightly. Debris settled underfoot. Even these small changes mattered. The camera recorded many of these moments unknowingly, not as events, but as atmosphere. A frame filled with texture rather than action. Surfaces worn smooth by repeated contact. Hands resting against stone. Fingers brushing dust away. These images carried weight without explanation. They did not tell stories directly. They suggested them. After long periods of waiting, movement would return briefly, not suddenly, gradually. A change in posture, a glance exchanged, a quiet signal understood. Then movement, careful, measured, and once again silence followed. This cycle repeated endlessly. Stillness, attention, adaptation. Fatigue settled into muscles and thoughts alike. But rest was not always possible. Even while sitting, awareness remained. Even while closing eyes, listening continued. Sleep came lightly, often interrupted. Yet people endured, not through determination, but through adjustment. They learned how to exist within limits. The camera did not capture exhaustion as collapse. It captured it as restraint. A still figure rather than a fallen one. A quiet posture rather than a dramatic gesture. These images rarely demanded attention, but they held it. Over time, many of these moments were forgotten. Not because they lacked importance, but because they lacked spectacle. They were not meant to impress. They were meant to pass unnoticed. And yet they remain. They remain because they reveal something essential. That history is not only shaped by decisive moments, but by long stretches of adaptation. By ordinary people learning how to remain present inside extraordinary conditions. These rare moments show the war not as an event, but as an environment. Not as a sequence of actions, but as a state of being. And perhaps that is why they feel unfamiliar. They do not explain. They do not conclude. They simply exist, just as the people within them once did.